On a scorching afternoon in Bakersfield, California, Highway 99 suddenly became the center of attention. A white SUV had flipped over and caught fire. People stopped their cars. Some screamed, some panicked, but no one moved closer, except for one man, dressed in greasy work clothes, with rough hands and a face covered in dust and sweat. He sprinted toward the burning vehicle. He smashed the rear window with his elbow, ignoring the flames creeping into the cabin. He pulled something out, a baby, still strapped in the back seat. The screams turned into stunned silence. His name, Derek Mason. To those who witnessed it, Derek was a hero, but to others, the name brought back uneasy memories. Because Derek was an ex-convict, a former gang member who had served time 3 separate times. To many, he was someone to avoid, not admire. Born and raised in the tough west side of Bakersfield, Derek never knew his father. His mother, an addict, was in and out of rehab. By 15, Derek was carrying a gun. At 19, he served his first sentence for armed robbery. His street name was Ghost because he appeared and vanished without a trace. Hopeless, directionless. His life changed drastically during his 3rd prison term, not because of any rehab program, but because of a letter from his daughter. "I don't know you, and I don't want to." Simple words, devastating impact. He read them over and over, night after night. In prison, he began to think, not about freedom, but about who he was and who he wanted to be. He started attending literacy classes, rereading poetry, the Bible, even Mandela's biography he found in the prison library. He began jotting down small things he was grateful for each day, a habit he called his second life journal. When he was released at 34, Derek had nothing but determination. He slept in his car for weeks, worked as an apprentice mechanic at a small garage. His hands were always cut and bruised. His wages were low, but he didn't complain. He just wanted a better life. For himself, for the daughter who had never hugged him. He tried contacting her several times, always failed. Letters were returned, but he kept writing. Sometimes, he'd slip them under his pillow. Sometimes, he mailed them to an old address, just in hope. Derek also began volunteering at a homeless shelter. There, he met Pastor Jerome, a local church leader who gave him a chance to share his life story. For the first time, Derek spoke in front of a crowd without shame. He shared everything, the wounds, the failures, the fear. "I ain't no saint, but if you need proof, people can change. Look at me." Then came that day, when a baby's life hung by seconds, and only one man ran toward the fire. After the incident, the community buzzed. Who was that man? Why was he so brave? Why did he cry after saving the baby? Some recognized him, some avoided him. But the story spread, not through video or national news, but word of mouth, through whispers in the neighborhood, about a former criminal who saved a life without expecting anything. Not everyone was impressed. Some dug up his past and resurfaced it. "He's a criminal. Don't let one good deed erase his history." But the most powerful words came from a woman, the baby's mother. "If not for him, my child might be gone. I don't care who he was. I care who he was in that moment, and that man saved my baby's life." After that, Derek was invited to speak in small community gatherings. He never called himself a hero. At every opportunity, he said, "I never wanted to be great. I just didn't want to be a coward anymore." He now speaks regularly at schools, churches, even the prison where he once served time. He doesn't hide his past. He uses it. Many former inmates come up to him after talks and say, "Man, you got me thinking about my life." His daughter, the one who once refused to speak to him, finally showed up at one of his talks. She sat in the back row. After the event, she hugged him for the first time. Derek's tears fell silently. That day, he wasn't Ghost anymore. He was a father, a man, a human being who proved Even the darkest soul can become a light for someone else. Derek now lives a modest life, still works at the garage, still helps out in the community. But now, he has something he never had before: peace. And every night, before bed, he writes one line in his journal. "Today, I didn't run from the fire. I ran into it." And the world now sees him not for who he was, but for his courage in saving one life. Sometimes we forget. Everyone deserves a second chance. The only question is, are we brave enough to give it? It was a quiet night in New Orleans. A man stood outside a small convenience store, his shadow cast long under the flickering streetlight. No weapon in hand, no leather jacket from his past life. Just a calm expression and eyes that had seen too much. His name, Marco Varelli. To the underworld, that name once meant danger. Marco was a former hitman, calculated, efficient, invisible. Over a 12-year career, he was linked to at least 18 deaths, none ever proven, all carefully executed. But that night, Marco wasn't there to kill. He was there to protect. Born into a rough Italian immigrant family in the Bronx, Marco's childhood was chaos. His mother died of an overdose when he was 7. His father was hardened steel, silent, angry, always working, never home. By 14, Marco was running errands for local gangsters. By 18, he was fully in. And by 21, he had become one of the most feared and trusted enforcers in the city. His nickname? The Whisper. Because when you heard his name, it was already too late. Then came 2011, a high-profile job. The target, Robert Mendez, a former prosecutor investigating organized crime. But when Marco entered the house, he froze. On the couch, a little boy, barely 7, was asleep watching cartoons. Marco lowered his weapon and walked away. The next morning, he was arrested. It was a sting. The house was wired. The FBI had set the trap, and Marco had stepped into it. But he didn't resist. He simply said, "I'm done." He was sentenced to 25 years, but cooperated with authorities, giving intel that dismantled a major crime ring. His sentence was reduced to 12. In prison, Marco changed, not because of therapy, not because of religion, but because of guilt. Real, suffocating guilt. He began journaling daily, wrote letters to families of his victims. Most never answered. He read everything from Dostoevsky to Malcolm X. He spent months in silence, just thinking. "I used to believe loyalty was everything," he wrote, "but loyalty to the wrong cause is just another form of cowardice." Released in 2023, Marco moved to New Orleans. No connections, no money, no plan. He took a job sweeping floors and stocking shelves at a small store owned by a Vietnamese family. He kept to himself. No one knew his past. Until one night, it all came back. 2 young men stormed the store, guns out. One screamed at the cashier. The other started smashing displays. One of them hit the owner, an elderly man, in the face. Marco heard the screams, and something inside him snapped. But not the old rage, not the killer instinct. Something new, something protective. In a blur, he disarmed the first man, pinning him to the ground. The second aimed a gun, but Marco moved faster. A precise strike, a broken wrist, and silence. By the time police arrived, both attackers were restrained. The officers were stunned. One recognized Marco, but the shop owner stepped forward. "If he hadn't been here, I might be dead." Word spread. The media caught wind. "Former hitman saves local store," the headlines read. But Marco refused interviews. He didn't want fame. He didn't want redemption tours. He just said, "I used to destroy lives. I can't undo that. But maybe I can protect a few now." He began volunteering at a local youth center, mentoring kids no one else could reach. His sessions weren't sugar-coated. He told the truth. About death. About regret. About how evil can wear a nice suit. One teenager once asked him, Why didn't you just walk away that night? You had no reason to get involved." Marco replied, "Because I spent half my life running from consequences and the other half pretending I didn't care. That night, I stopped running." Today, Marco lives in a small apartment above the store he once saved. He doesn't have social media. He doesn't post quotes or selfies. But every night, he writes one sentence in his journal: "I didn't hurt anyone today." And that has to count for something. From a ghost of violence to a quiet guardian of peace, Marco Varelli didn't change because he had to. He changed because, deep down, even a hitman can remember what it means to be human. It happened on a rainy afternoon in south-central Los Angeles. The streets were slick with water, the sky a heavy gray blanket, and people rushed through the sidewalks with umbrellas and hoodies, eager to get out of the weather. At the corner of Vernon and Central, a small crowd gathered, drawn by the sound of screeching tires and a cry for help. A sedan had spun out and slammed into a utility pole, smoke rising from under the hood, and inside a woman trapped, unconscious, slumped against the steering wheel. People froze, cars kept driving, some pulled out phones. But no one moved, except for one man. He stepped out of a liquor store across the street, tall, muscular, his arms inked with gang symbols and faded prison tattoos. A face the neighborhood recognized, but crossed the street to avoid. His name was Julio Bones Ramirez, a former enforcer for the Barrio 16th Street gang, a man with a rap sheet as long as the block. Assault, grand theft, weapons charges, time in and out of prison since he was 17. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Julio sprinted across the street, straight into traffic. A car swerved, horns blared. He didn't stop. Rain soaked his shirt, smoke burned his eyes, and he didn't care. He reached the wreck and pulled at the door. It wouldn't budge. He yelled for someone to help. No one did, so he grabbed a parking sign and used it like a crowbar. Metal groaned, glass shattered, and somehow Julio pried the door open. He reached in and unbuckled the woman. Her head lolled, blood at her temple. He lifted her out with both arms and carried her to the sidewalk. Moments later, the engine burst into flames. He laid her down, checked her pulse, then sat beside her in the rain, waiting for paramedics to arrive. Someone filmed it. The video spread fast. Tattooed gang member saves woman from car fire. Former criminal turns hero. But those who knew Julio weren't surprised. Not anymore. Because this wasn't the first time he put himself on the line. 3 years earlier, Julio got out of prison for the last time. Tired, number angry. He had no family, no job, no plan. But he had one moment, one conversation, that changed everything. A prison counselor named Marcus gave him a worn-out Bible and said, "You don't have to be what they called you. You get to choose who you are." Julio didn't believe it at first, but he kept that book. And when he got out, he left the gang. He started working nights cleaning a grocery store, then a warehouse, then a boxing gym. He stopped fighting in alleys and started coaching kids. "Most of these kids come from where I came from," he told a local reporter. "If I can stop one of them from making the choices I made, it's worth it." Still, the neighborhood didn't trust him. Not at first. Old enemies saw his tattoos and crossed the street. Shop owners watched him like a hawk. Parents warned their kids to stay away. But he kept showing up, quietly, consistently. Then came the accident, and everything changed. After the rescue, the woman, a school teacher named Angela Kim, spoke publicly. "He didn't hesitate. He didn't ask who I was. He just saved me. If that's not a hero, I don't know what is." Julio didn't seek praise. He refused TV interviews. He told a friend, "I didn't do it to be famous. I did it because if I had walked away, I wouldn't have been able to live with myself." Today, Julio still lives in South Central, still walks past the gang graffiti that once marked his identity, still wears the same tattoos. But now, when people see him, they nod. They say thank you. They ask for his story, and every day he tells it, not to brag, but to remind the world people can change. Even those we fear the most can become the ones who run toward danger when no one else will.